James.
Tom.
Thanks for spending some time with me.
Let's do that again. Let's do that again.
On it, James.
Oh, no, start again. Right.
We're standing or we're sitting?
It's up to you. It's set it up for us to sit, so.
Alright, let's sit.
Let's go again.
James,
Tom.
thanks for spending some time with me. Really appreciate it. I know offload and mental fitness is something that we speak about quite a lot in both our day-to-day jobs and in offload and in Fit Tackle. And it was really important to me that we got this bit of time to sit down and chat and to give people who come on the programme a little bit of an insight around what offload is, the support it offers, but also around mental fitness and mental health in general. You know, I understand that everyone will access the programmes that we deliver, but just having that bit of an understanding and seeing things a little bit clearer and how we can support is always beneficial, isn't it? So tell me a little bit, what is offload? Just give me a bit of an overview.
So, OFFLOAD is a 10-week mental fitness project targeting men aged 18 and over to come to the LiveWire Jones Stadium and learn coping mechanisms, tools, tactics, tips for managing their mental fitness from elite athletes and the experiences that professional kind of rugby league players and other sportsmen and sportswomen bring to the discussions. So within the sport of rugby league, we've had some very tragic circumstances when it comes to some of our professional athletes taking their own lives. And OFFLOAD started 6 years or so ago now, and it's seen over 1,000 men come through the door and open up about some of the things that are going on in their lives and normalising the conversation about what we call mental fitness.
Yeah.
I keep using that term mental fitness because that reframing is really, really important. When we first started this project, and to a certain extent there still is, a lot of stigma around the term mental health. We all have mental health.
Yeah.
It just varies depending on what's happening in our lives at the time. So when we first started the project, we did a lot of advertising in the stadium, in lots of different places where men would normally kind of go to and talk about what's going on in their lives, pubs, barbers, betting shops. And the response rate at the start was pretty low, to be honest. But we sat down with the people that came through the door initially and said, what is it that attracts you to a place like the LiveWire Jones Stadium? What is it that would encourage you to open up and talk about kind of what's going on with your emotions and your feelings? Maybe in some cases for the very first time. And the feedback that came back was incredibly valuable in that what they said was, you can be the fittest, fastest, strongest athlete out on the rugby league pitch. But if there's something that's not going right away from the game, it could be an issue with a relationship, it could be challenges with an injury or a long-term health condition, it could be issues with debt or finance, it could be that you've been bereaved within your personal life. If there's something that's not quite right away from the pitch or in the rugby league players' cases, their work, then it can massively impact on other areas of your life. And that was a real groundbreaking moment for me, that despite kind of the fame, the adulation, the money, the cars, mental health is kind of something that we all have. And your level of mental fitness doesn't discriminate based on your status or your occupation or your family background. It can affect anyone at any time. So for me, when we talk about mental fitness, the best way to describe it is it's like a roller coaster, and it's the ability to deal with the ups and downs of life that inevitably we will come across, and being able to build the resilience and the kit bag, as we call it in OFFLOAD, of different pieces of equipment that if you need something, you just dip into that kit bag and you pick it out and you say, I'm going to try that. And if it works, you keep using it.
Yeah. So I suppose what you're saying is that, we put these athletes on a pedestal, don't we? And, we look at them like these superhumans that can do anything. and they do struggle, and they, at times they do need to dip into those kind of coping strategies and that kit bag that you talk about. I think at times people struggle to associate themselves with people like that, don't they? And I think sometimes highlighting the fact that everyone struggles can take away a bit of that stigma, can't it? Is that something, when you're delivering these groups, is that something that people bring up quite a lot, the stigma attached to mental health, and, are they allowed to suffer with stress and anxiety when they've got, families to bring up, they've got jobs to do? Do people see it as a bit of a weakness at times, perhaps?
I think times have changed. I think we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
There is a huge stigma around mental fitness or mental health still, and stigma's a killer.
Yeah.
The statistics are very shocking when it comes to suicide rates, and 75% of all suicides are males, and it's a very complex issue, and again, every situation is very unique. But I think when you look at the male stereotypes that get built up over generations, it's important to think about that, because as a man, you are discouraged, or you have been discouraged, to open up and talk in certain situations. Many of us might have to wear a mask, whether it be in our professional lives or whether it be in our personal lives, to really kind of hide what's going on behind the scenes. That traditional male stereotype of being the breadwinner, being the person that's going to fix all the problems, the person that never will struggle with anything, and that kind of toxic masculinity that's built up kind of adds to that stigma. And it's important that we challenge that, because once we identify that we all have feelings and we all have emotions and we get affected by different things at different points, that's a really powerful place to start. That corridor of vulnerability, where if you open up and talk a little bit about something that is stressing you or making you anxious or keeping you awake at night, what you find very often is that by kind of showing that, showing behind the mask a little bit, you build connection with people. And when you build connection with people, you start a conversation. When you start a conversation, you start a relationship. When you start a relationship, you start to build trust. And when you trust someone, that's when you can be open and truly honest. So what we try and do through all of our programs here at Warrington Wolves, and in particular our mental fitness programs, is say that as long as you can find one person that you can trust to be truly 100% authentically you, that's a great starting point.
Yeah.
And if you can't find that away from projects like Offload, then come to Offload, because when you're in that changing room, what we don't do is we don't go around the room and we don't ask people to open up about what's going on in their life, because that's a very private kind of matter. If people want to, we absolutely provide that opportunity. But what we have is we have a series of head coaches who talk about their own personal lived experiences. Some of them are elite athletes, some of them are CEOs of organisations, some of them are in different walks of life, education, sport, fashion, music. But actually what they do is they show their vulnerability, and that encourages other men to open up as well.
So when they open up and they start to kind of recognise these emotions, and whether it be a little bit of stress, maybe anxiety, worry, what's kind of the next phase then? So they've opened up, they've found a safe space, they can speak to people they trust, they've probably got a little bit of a better understanding of why they feel in a certain way. What's kind of the next step from there? What do you do with that person then? Once they've opened up, how do you help them then to build that little bit of resilience and I suppose coping mechanisms to deal with the emotions they're feeling?
Well, actually, that's the power of the group. So what we do is, it talks about different kind of tactics that we use. So one of the main tactics that we have used in Offload is we're now building a mindfulness session. Now, mindfulness, and there's a lot of science and there's a lot of research around the impact of mindfulness on stress and anxiety. But in a nutshell, what mindfulness is it's being in the present moment. It's not worrying about something that's happened in the past or thinking too much about what could happen in the future. It's appreciating kind of where you are as of now. And by being in that space, you haven't got anything to worry about in the future. You haven't got anything to think about in the past. And that takes practice, and that takes discipline, and it takes investment. And it's the same as any of our tools or any of our tactics that we use in our kit bag. It's about encouraging kind of men and anyone else, because mindfulness is something that anyone can use. Men, women, children, older people. Well, what it does is it kind of slows the world down a little bit. It slows people's minds down so that if you've got lots of things kind of buzzing around your mind, or you can't concentrate on one thing for long enough, the way our mindfulness coach describes it, it's almost like people start with a million balls bouncing around their head. But after a few sessions of mindfulness, that million might go down to 500,000. After a few more sessions, it might go down to 100,000.
Yeah.
Then it might go down to 50,000 to 10,000, and that's a bit more manageable the longer that you invest in it. So, going back to your question there about kind of what we do with men, all of the men in that room are there for a unique reason. They're all united by the fact that their mental fitness is or has been low.
Yeah.
And yes, we provide over 120 different tools and tactics. Mindfulness is one of those. But the men also bring extra tools and extra techniques. So the men talk about gratitude and practicing gratitude. They talk about the 5 ways to well-being. They talk about becoming more active. They talk about getting out into nature. They talk about other forms of relaxation, yogas, tai chi, qigong.
Yeah.
And actually what we try and do is we expose the people that come into projects like OFFLOAD to as many of those as possible, because one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
And ultimately you'll find the things that will contribute to improving your mental fitness. And I think that's where we talk about stress. We talk about the stress bucket. So everyone has a stress bucket in their life. We both have a stress bucket. Ours are probably very different sizes. And that's influenced by lots of different things. Our genetics, our levels of resilience, our past experiences. But we all have a stress bucket. Now, everything that we do throughout the day might contribute into that stress bucket. It might be that you've slept through your alarm in the morning. That's a little bit of stress that goes into your stress bucket. It might be that you walk out in the morning, like this morning, and you've got to defrost your car and you won't bounce on that. So you've got to give yourself another 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You're then starting to run late for dropping the kids off or getting to work or missing a meeting. You then get to work and then you realise you've left your battery charger for your laptop at home. And all those things throughout the day maybe contribute some stress into your stress bucket. When people don't have the mechanisms to release that stress, or when their stress gets to a level where that bucket overflows, that's when people start to struggle.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about how people cope with stresses in their life. So there are some positive coping strategies. We're involved in one in terms of what we do as kind of our day jobs around physical activity. So that's a good way. It's a positive way of releasing some stress. Going for a walk at lunchtime, or taking the dog for a walk at night, or playing with the kids on the park when you get home at night. That's a really positive one. But sometimes people use negative coping strategies as well. So things like alcohol, drinking to forget or numb the pain, or drinking to excess, which again can cause other kind of problems and health issues in the longer term as well. People might build up kind of those emotions and might not have a valve to release it. So when you kind of release your stress using a negative coping strategy, what generally tends to happen is that kind of stress will end up coming back into your bucket, and sometimes it comes back twice as bad.
Yeah.
So you think about alcohol. So you have a bad week, so you think, I can't wait till kind of 5 o'clock on a Friday, I can go to the pub and I can have a few beers. If your mental fitness is challenged and you've had a bad week, your stress levels in your stress bucket are probably filling up quite quickly. So actually to release that stress, you go for a beer or you go for a binge. Temporarily that stress gets released. But what alcohol is, it's a depressant. So you wake up the following morning, not only have you got a hangover, potentially, you've also got some depressant in your body in the form of alcohol. So actually your starting point the following day is maybe a lot lower than it was. And we try and encourage, we never say to people, don't do things, but we ask the question to people, why are you using those negative coping strategies? What's the purpose of it? And rather than kind of completely kind of getting rid of them, actually, can we replace one, two of those maybe negative coping strategies for a more positive one? So actually at the end of the week, instead of maybe going on a binge, maybe go to the pub and have a meal and have a couple of drinks, rather than going to the pub and having 4, 5, 6, 7 drinks to forget. And it's those small changes, and again, in the Fit to Tackle project, you talk a lot about small changes over a long period of time, and it's the same as physical fitness. If you want to get fit in terms of your body, you want to get stronger, you want to build your muscles, you want to increase your mobility, you go to a gym. If you want to get more mentally fit, where do you go? So what we do in Offload and through all of our sessions is say, actually, Offload is like the brain gym. And I think that the important message out of what we've just said there is that thinking about how often you move your body throughout the day, and this goes for everyone that's on Fit to Tackle. You move your body to walk, you move your body to run, you move your body to do the Fit to Tackle sessions, you move your body to take the dog for a walk, as I said before. How often do you spend time preparing your brain for what's to come? So, thinking about our brains, we as human beings, in terms of our physiology, our brains haven't evolved since caveman times. So, stress is the body's natural response to what it perceives as danger. So, in terms of cavemen, what they were worried about was where they're going to eat and who they're going to get attacked by. Well, we're lucky in Warrington that we don't have any buffaloes that chase us around anymore. But our brains and the way our brains respond to stress is still the same. So we kind of respond with a fight, a flight, or a freeze response. And actually what I find is when I'm talking to people who do have those kind of issues around stress and anxiety, their stress isn't released. It continues to remain at a high level. And physiologically, if you store stress for a long period of time where you continue to keep kind of taking on stresses in your body, it can have some effects on your health, your physical health, whether it be your heart, whether it be certain cancers, whether it be your ability to recover from illnesses, it affects your immune system. So actually, in terms of stress, that's a really important point that you talk about there. And one of the things that I think, if we were doing this session with a group, the next question I'd be asking is in terms of your recovery. So through Fit to Tackle, after the sessions, you're encouraged to eat, you're encouraged to stretch, you're encouraged to have a bath, and actually you're encouraged to recover physically. Whenever we are stressed or kind of our bodies are put under some form of exercise, whether it be our brains or our bodies, they need to recover. And the only way they recover is through sleep. So the question I'd be asking to the audience now, and you can do this at home if you want to, is do you struggle to get to sleep? Do you struggle to stay asleep? Or do you sleep for too long? And I wouldn't ask anyone at this stage to tell me any details about any of that. But ultimately, if you've answered yes to one of those three questions, then I'd be looking and saying, oh, what's your sleep hygiene like? And by sleep hygiene, I don't mean washing your sheets every couple of weeks. What I mean is thinking about how you prepare yourself for sleep. So there are different phases of sleep, and we haven't got time to necessarily go into them today, but it's interesting if anyone is kind of keen to learn a little bit more about how our bodies respond to stress and recover. There's a wave or a phase of sleep which helps our bodies recover physically. So if you get an injury, you pull a muscle at fit to tackle, but actually you recover when you're asleep. If you've been affected emotionally by something, and we've talked about some of those things before, you're stressed, you're anxious, until you can get into that next wave or next phase of sleep, your brains and your emotions are never going to fully recharge and repair. So I talk a lot about sleep, and people who kind of will know what I do in terms of my sleep. For example, one of the tools or tactics that we would use around sleep or stress coping would be preparing the body for sleep. So things like the impact of caffeine, not having caffeine after 12 noon, because the effects of caffeine last for full 12 hours.
Yeah.
So if you're having a Red Bull at 12 noon, or even before the fit to tackle session, you've got to think 12 hours ahead. So if you're having your Red Bull at 5:30, that stays in your system till 5:30 in the morning. So the caffeine still continues to work and gets released. So think about when you consume your caffeine, as one example. Another example might be thinking about how you prepare for bed. Have you got a TV in the bedroom? Do you scroll on your phone for a couple of hours before bed? Well, actually what the phones and the TVs do is they emit something called blue light. And blue light goes into our eyes and it triggers our retinas. And it makes us think that it's time to wake up or get up. So if our retinas are triggered, it then kickstarts the rest of our systems to then wake up. So then we're ready for the day ahead. But it might be 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And then you wonder why when you get into bed. You sit on the couch and you maybe start nodding off and you think it's time for bed. You get into bed, you scroll for half an hour or an hour, and then you wonder why you can't get back to sleep for a good few hours. That's one example. So in terms of stress and coping, sleep can be a massive factor in our ability to improve our mental fitness.
I think all the points you've said there, and there's so many good points, highlight the correlation and how intertwined physical and mental well-being are. I think that's why it's always been so important to me that you do classify it as mental fitness rather than mental health. We talk about how do you recover from stress, similar to the way how do we recover from the stress you put your body under during exercise. We know that eating healthier will help you with your controlling your weight and with your exercise. We also know it has quite a big effect on your mental well-being in terms of the sugar intake, things like that. We know that caffeine can affect your sleep, and your sleep affects mental health. We also know that sleep affects your physical well-being. So we could go on all day about these things that go back into, but I think what you've done there is you've highlighted the importance of not just being physically fit, but also being mentally fit, and vice versa. I'd challenge you to go out and find me someone that is as mentally fit as they can be if they're physically unfit, because you won't find them. Same as you will not find someone who's completely physically fit who's got really poor mental fitness. The two do go hand in hand. I think an important part for me with any sort of programs, in our world, in the health and wellbeing world, is that kind of lived experience. I'm a big advocate of kind of walking a mile in someone else's shoes. Everything that we do at Fit to Tackle, although people don't always see it, I have done it. I've experienced it. We send people for a lap of the pitch around, up and down all the steps. I've been there. I've done it for 12 hours, as you know. For every 10 tyre slams that someone does in there, I've done 100. I've been there. I understand how people feel, and I can kind of respond and make sure that the exercise is suitable. I suppose where I'm going with that is, you speak so much about stress, coping strategies. You've kind of touched on it a little bit there with sleep, but kind of from lived experience for you, have you got an example in your life where you've been, you've perhaps been through some of those stresses you spoke about, and maybe not dealt with them as well as you would have done, knowing the things you know now, and how have you reacted?
Yeah, I think that word authentic comes into that conversation. And again, I think you're a great example of, you would never ask anyone on any of your projects to do something that you haven't either done yourself or you haven't attempted to do.
Yeah.
And I do firmly believe that kind of that lived experience is crucial to offload. So for me, probably there's a couple of examples, but the first one I'll give really is when I first started delivering offload. One of the things that happened to me, which is quite common, I'm led to believe, by anyone that's involved in delivering kind of peer support groups, particularly around mental health, is I took on, without realising, when people were offloading and they were feeling better, they'd given kind of their mental fitness challenges or poor mental fitness.
Yeah.
They'd inadvertently, I'd taken it on.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of me as a person, very kind of caring and very empathetic, good listener, and I try and, like you said, try and kind of sit with someone.
Yeah.
And try and understand what they're going through. What that did to me was that affected my mental fitness, because I'd be going away from the sessions and I'd be playing scenarios through in my head about, well, have I said the right thing?
Yeah.
Or even though I'm trained to deliver these sessions, could I have said something different? Or is there something else this person needs outside of what we can offer in terms of our project? And it took kind of someone, and at the time it was my boss. He kind of said to me one day, and I used to sit opposite him. He said to me one day, he said, are you okay? And I kind of said, yeah, I'm fine. And he said, well, are you really okay? Because you've just stared blankly at that wall for the last 5 minutes. And I was, and that kind of threw me a little bit, because clearly what I must have been doing was thinking through a scenario from the previous night when the men kind of, and the rule in offload is, what happens in offload stays in offload unless there is a risk to you, or there is a risk to somebody else in your life. And we've got kind of policies and we've got mechanisms to help those people who there is a risk to, or they're a risk to somebody else. So at the time, kind of bearing in mind that we've had over 1,000 men that have gone through offload now, everyone comes with a different set of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And we try and provide the best supportive environment we can. So I quickly realised that, reflecting back on it, that there were changes in me. So one of the things that kind of I'd go away and do is I wouldn't empty my stress bucket. So we talked before about the stress bucket. Without realising it and without appreciating it, everybody offloading to me, it has to go somewhere. So it was ending up going into my stress bucket, and I didn't have either the negative coping strategies or the positive coping strategies to release that extra stress that was going into my bucket. And what I quickly realised as a result of that conversation was I needed some professional help. I needed to reach out and say, look, this is not something I've ever experienced before. The way I was feeling, it was almost quite numb, and I was kind of in a headspace really where I'd never experienced anything like that before, but I felt a huge responsibility back to the men in that group to make sure they were well. But what I wasn't doing was looking after my own mental fitness. So I went through some counselling, and again, there's a lot of myths around what counselling is, and kind of different people will have different experiences. The counselling was really helpful to me on a personal level, but what that also helped me do was it helped me kind of inform the way the sessions went moving forward. So the counselling process was kind of very liberating for me, because it was the first time I'd actually spoken about the way I'd felt. I'd listened to the way other people had felt, but actually it was the first time I'd spoken to my counsellor. And the thing about counselling is They are trained to help you find the answers.
Yeah.
And the answers were all within me. And I just had to find my way to the taps of the stress bucket.
Yeah.
Not to the negative taps. I had to find my way to the positive.
Yeah.
So that's when I started investing in mindfulness. I started setting myself daily goals. Set myself 3 goals every day. The first one is to make my bed. The second one is to do something active. So this morning I walked the dog down the Trans-Pennine Trail. And the third one is to do something for me. That could be anything. That could be listen to a podcast. That could be go to the cinema. That could be go and treat myself to a coffee. That could be listen to my favourite album. That could just be sitting in silence for 10 minutes. But again, if we were doing this session with a group of people, that would be the question I'd be asking to anyone watching this. When was the last time you did something that was just for you? It wasn't for someone else, it was just for you. And I kind of developed this mantra, which kind of a lot of people use anyway, but I'd never come across it before, around this idea that self-care isn't selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And selfish has a lot of negative connotations as a word, but actually, as long as you're not kind of benefit from other people for your own gain,
Yeah.
actually you're investing in yourself, that is selfish, and that's important to do. So that's self-care and looking after yourself, because if I don't look after myself, number one, I'm not going to be able to look after anyone else. But second of all, what I'm not doing is I'm not being true to the values of the program and what we deliver. Because I'm encouraging these men and people to look after themselves. But if I'm not doing it for me, then that makes me a fraud.
Yeah.
So when I stood up in front of people after I'd realised what, because again, I never realised what was happening. I was confused. I was clearly a different person.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, people said to me, "Yeah, we noticed you were different, but either we didn't know how to address it with you, or we thought that there were things going on that we didn't want to pry into your personal life."
Yeah.
But I guess the advice to anyone really is if you notice something in someone that's different, it could be that they're not returning your phone calls, or they take 3 or 4 days to respond to a message, or they're overly aggressive or agitated or quiet, withdrawn, not their typical kind of outgoing self, then ask the question. Don't ask that question, "Are you okay?" Because we're conditioned as humans to give the bog standard response, "Yeah, I'm fine."
Yeah.
Because it's wearing that mask again.
Yeah.
And when we wear that mask, we're trying to throw people off the scent. So if you suspect that that is happening in someone's life and they're not quite themselves, ask the question, "How are you feeling?" And I noticed that I got a very different response.
Yeah.
So we have, as I mentioned before, we have head coaches. And I always take different things from everybody, whether it be kind of the people on the projects or the head coaches. And one of the things that I found really useful from one of the head coaches, and he's a current player, I won't kind of say who it is, but he's a current player, was that he's now put a system in place around him that if he struggles with his mental health, his first thing is he withdraws. And he's recognised that, he's reflected, and he said, "That is what I do when I'm struggling. I withdraw, and I don't want to speak to anyone, I don't want to be in any social situation." So he said, "What I do," he said, "I've got 3 people that I trust." He said, if they don't hear from me, either message in, ring me or see me, in 2 days, he said, I've told them to come round and knock on my door, and they've got a key to my house.
Yeah.
So they can walk in and say, "Right, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Let's go for a walk, let's go for a brew, let's go for a beer," whatever it is. And actually, what we don't do as human beings enough is appreciate sometimes that it's those simple things, the care for each other, the conversations that we have, the ability to see things in other people that maybe we've seen in ourselves, and having gone through that phase where I had the counselling, had the therapy, and thankfully I'm back on track. And that was really important. Is I can now see things in other people that were happening to me, so I can relate. So your kind of statement at the start about the importance of being able to connect with people who are struggling with their physical fitness, their long-term health, their mental well-being is so important, because when you connect with people, you can make positive things happen. And we see it in our projects time and time again. With Fit to Tackle, you've ramped up mental fitness to be the same level as physical fitness. My challenge with Offload is to ramp physical fitness to come up to the same level as mental fitness. And if we get that right in Fit to Tackle and we get that right in Offload, we're going to help so many more people than we already are.
I think, listening to what you're saying there, it's almost, though it is a cheesy saying, but knowledge is power.
Yeah.
You know, you said there, your whole kind of journey started with someone asking you, is everything alright? You don't see yourself. And that kind of set the ball rolling, and it almost snowballed from there. You know, you recognised it first of all. You actually started to think, maybe something is a little bit off. You've then gone out and seek support, which you've got, and from that support, you've learned coping mechanisms that work for you. Then what happens, as you just said there, is you're in such a stronger position then to recognise what your manager at the time recognised in you. I'll happily say that there was a period of time where you said, we went through the same thing you went through your manager. You said to me, you seem a bit off, is everything alright? I then thought, actually, maybe not. I've then had to learn my coping mechanisms, which has made me a more rounded person to offer the next person support. So I suppose, the work that we're doing in Offload and Fit to Tackle is about kind of spreading that reach, isn't it? And making sure that more people are aware of how they can, cope with stress and anxiety and the pressures of everyday life, but also to help those people around them and have those conversations that maybe a few years ago, when the stigma was, a little bit less approachable, people weren't having. So that's for me, as you know, that's why mental fitness is so important, and that's why it's such an important part of Fit to Tackle. Like I say, the more people we can get to understand the things that we talk about in our world, the more people will kind of understand it and be supported by it.
Yeah. And I think as well, when you talk there, I think the word that kind of we've not used enough of really is empathy. We know that we can't solve the problems that people that come to us on our projects have. What we can do though is we can listen.
Yeah.
We can sit with them. We can try and understand without actually maybe knowing how they feel or the way they're thinking. And most people don't want people to solve their problems for them. They just want someone that gets it.
Yeah.
And that can kind of offer that listening ear. And I think what's great about the two projects is we do it as leaders of those projects, but we've also got a series of volunteers or mentors that we've trained up to be of the same kind of mindset and the same mentality. And I think I always refer back to a lady called Brené Brown, and anyone that's watching this, she's an American speaker, psychologist. She's done a lot of work around empathy and human behaviour. And the one thing that always sticks out for me that she said is an empathetic response never begins with "at least." Well, I'm struggling with one of my kids at home. Well, actually, at least the other kid's doing well.
Yeah.
Or I'm struggling to lose weight through Fit to Tackle. Oh, well, at least you're on the right journey. That's not an empathetic response.
Yeah.
An empathetic response is, I'll sit with you. What you shared with me now, I don't know what to say. but I'm glad you shared it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's more of an empathetic response. So when you build those communities and you build that sense of belonging that clearly we've both got with our projects, what that does is that really supports people. We're only in a position to deliver our projects for a short period of time, maybe an hour and a half block, once, twice a week. But actually the real kind of progress happens away from our projects. We equip people with those tools or those pieces of equipment in their kit bags, but actually the bit that continues to sustain that changes in behaviour is that sense of knowledge, that sense of feeling part of something, that sense of I'm not on my own with this. And when you're going through whether you're struggling with your mental fitness or you're struggling with your physical fitness, you can quickly get into your head and think you're the only one that is struggling with this particular part of it. But you get in a group situation and you realise that everyone struggles with something. And the real kind of failure of us as human beings is not to ask for help when we need it, because when you ask for help from people you trust, nobody turns your way. But it's stepping over that threshold into that vulnerability corridor that we talked about before, because it's a scary step.
Yeah, it takes courage.
That's right for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to put you on the spot. Go on. So we've talked everything, some great advice, some great information, and I'm only putting you on the spot to know it's you. But what's the takeaway message? You know, for those that are going to sit through and watch this, what's your parting note to them?
Takeaway note really is, first and foremost, look at yourself. Look at what you're doing, and is there something there that you want to change, or you want to improve, or you want to try something different? The take-home message beyond that is very much around, if you need help with anything, find someone you trust. They might not know the answers, but if you've got a relationship with them and you've got the rapport with them, they will help you find someone that can. And I'm always blown away by the people that we have through our projects. They almost reach a sweet spot, or a moment of clarity, or a time when the penny drops, when you can see them kind of move into being ready to help others.
Yeah.
And for some people that might take a short time, for others it's a long time. The take-home message for me is your journey. Doesn't matter how long it takes you to get to your destination. Don't compare yourself to other people, because your journey is your journey, and you're the best version of you. Everybody else will be rubbish at being you.
I love it. And fortunately for those that are involved in these projects, we're there to support them on every step of the journey, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Tom.
You're a star.